deputy governorship, attorney general, both chambers of the Virginia Assembly. How do you get blanket gun confiscation? It is directly tied to demographic change. It is directly tied, in other words, to mass immigration. And so a lot of people don't see the connection between these two things. But we can see very, very clearly in the case of Virginia how everything proceeds from immigration. And to show you how that is, I could tell you how it is, but I could also show you with a whiteboard the cycle of what's happening in our country. Maybe this will show you in a very visual way the process that is taking place, how we get to a blue Virginia, how we get gun confiscation. We've got a nice little flow chart here. As I said, it will show you how gun confiscation and other bad policies proceed. They are the consequence of mass immigration. So I'll turn down my brightness here so you can see a little bit better. This is the cycle that we have witnessed for the past 50 years. You've got step one. Immigrants come to America. Now, most people have no problem with this. People have a problem with gun confiscation. They've got a problem with socialism, big government. They've got a problem with high taxes, people not assimilating. But most conservatives even are in favor of step one. Immigrants are coming to America. America's a nation of immigrants. Right? Just like our ancestors, you know? Our ancestors came from Italy and England and Germany and Sweden and Spain and Poland. Now they're coming from Mexico. I'm sure that's fine. I'm sure that's a totally trivial, arbitrary difference. Now they're coming from China and India and Korea. So even if you're a Polish, you'd come and settle in as the New York Times says, these green mountains, these green hills, I should say, in northern Virginia for generations. If you're Polish, if you're English, just like people had for centuries, now it's suburban townhouses filled with Koreans and Indians. I'm sure it's all qualitatively the same. So first step is immigrants come to America. Of course, step number two is the immigrants vote Democrat. We all know this. Everybody knows this implicitly, even if they don't acknowledge it consciously. We know that blacks vote 91% on a bad day for Democrats. On a good day, they vote 98% for Democrats. We saw that in 2008 with Barack Obama. We saw that in recent governor's elections in the South last month in November. The Louisiana governorship, the Mississippi governorship, 98% blacks for Democrats. We see in California and across the country with Hispanics, 75% for Democrats. Hispanics have not in this century, voted more than 35% for a Republican president. Asians, 75% Democrat. So across the board, Asians and Hispanics at 75%, that's like the low water mark. And for blacks, the low water mark is 90%. So we know that immigrants are coming to America. The immigrants are all non-white. Virtually all of them are from either Africa, Asia, or Latin America. The immigrants come to the country, and because they are non-white, they vote Democrat, you know, and we've talked a lot about why that is. That's probably another show, but they come here and they do vote Democrat, whether you understand it, whether you say it's because of they're not assimilating or they've been lied to by the media. They just haven't read Milton Friedman enough, but that's what's happening. Number three, Democrats win elections. That is what happened in California. I will keep saying this because I think people forget, but Ronald Reagan won California 4 times. Richard Nixon won California 6 times. Easily. Richard Nixon won California 6 times easily. Ronald Reagan won California 4 times easily. We won California in 1988. George H.W. Bush did. I mean, that's not, in the grand scheme of things, that's not a really long time ago. Why is California now a deep blue, hardcore, progressive, liberal shithole? Who do you think drove that electoral change and subsequent change in policy and therefore change in quality of life? Well, it was mass immigration, and we know where it came from. It came from Asia, and it came from Latin America. This is the same process happening in Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Georgia, Florida, North Carolina, and yes, Virginia. So immigrants come to America. They vote for Democrats. Democrats win elections because they're driving all the population growth. The immigrants are. And this is the most important point. This is the longest point. These are all pretty simple and obvious, but this is the ultimate outcome. Of course, we know this too. Democrats pass policies that further the dispossession of Native Americans. They further the dispossession of the Native American population. I'm not talking about American Indians. I'm talking about the people that have lived in this country for generations, which is mostly white people. They pass policies that further the dispossession of white people. What do you think chief among those policies would be? More immigration. This is the cycle that has eroded the country. And of course, this is really where everything starts to shoot out from. Once Democrats get in power, they pass not just immigration, but a variety of policies that further the dispossession of the native people. They pass things, for example, like going after guns. You know, they want to go after the Second Amendment. They want to do gun confiscation. They want to pass gun control. New immigrants do not believe in the Second Amendment. You can look at Pew Research. There is not a single non-white group of people, there's not a single non-white demographic in America that the majority of them support your right to bear arms. Not a single one. Pew Research. They also do things like they vote for hate speech legislation, like we have been seeing in New York City. It's now illegal to use illegal immigrant as a pejorative. We saw in Connecticut, some kid got arrested for saying the N-word. In Naperville, not far from where I live, some kid got arrested for making a racist joke. A high schooler got arrested for making a racist joke against a black classmate. They go after the First Amendment. There's another area. Pew Research says, again, not a single non-white demographic in America is not in favor of hate speech laws. Does not believe that the First Amendment is immune from hate speech, right? Or they don't believe that First Amendment protects hate speech. They don't believe that. So you get anti-First Amendment. You get, of course, socialism. You get, of course, a variety of other things that are meant to facilitate Democrat electoral victories, like expanding the franchise, making democracy more direct, doing away with the Electoral College, letting prisoners vote, letting you vote without an ID, right? Eroding the process of a legitimate election. So this is really the part where people are missing. I think everybody gets this. Everybody gets this part. Yeah, immigrants are coming here. They're voting Democrat. Democrats are winning elections. We understand all that. And people want to explain it away. Well, here's why. Well, here's what we need to do, whatever. But, this is ultimately the outcome. And why do you think Democrats are bringing in more immigrants? Because they know that immigrants will perpetuate this. They know that immigrants will perpetuate this system. What they are doing is weaponizing foreign populations against the Native American population. That is what we're seeing. It is the weaponization of foreign populations against the Native people because they know. Just look at the way they vote. They know that these people come over here and they will reliably vote for Democrats. They will not be asking questions. They will not be scrutinizing things. If anything, they become more Democratic as they stay here longer. Particularly, you see this with Asians. Obviously, blacks have been here forever, and they vote Democrat more than anybody, right? What is the end goal of all of this? Well, in the first place, the first sort of situation is you're going to see white people become a minority in America. That's because of immigration. They bring in immigrants. Immigrants vote for mass immigration. And as a consequence, you just get this endless cycle of immigrants coming here. Immigrants vote for more immigration. More immigrants come here. The immigrants come here, vote for more immigration. More immigrants come here. That's really the cycle, right? But it's perpetuating other cycles. There's other externalities of this as well. So the first consequence is that, Democrats will solidify their control over the country and white people become a minority. Now, here's where gun control plays a really important part. Why do a lot of Republicans say we need the Second Amendment? What do they talk about specifically? What are some specific arguments they use against gun control? What examples? When they're trying to appeal particularly to minorities. They say, well, the first thing that Hitler did when he got into power was he took away the guns. If Jews had guns, they could have protected themselves against the Holocaust. They would have never been turned into lampshades and bars of soap if they just had their firearms. I don't know if that happened or not. I have to check with the Holocaust Museum, that part of it. What about slavery? They say, well, blacks need firearms because firearms protected them against the KKK during the period of Reconstruction in the post-war South, right? They say that minorities need firearms to protect themselves. What are we going to be in 30 years? What is the countdown? I think it's like 28 years. We're going to become a minority. So when conservatives make these arguments about, the Nazis took the guns and, racist Southerners took away guns from blacks, we have sort of like this very patronizing attitude. Like, well, look, black people, you should support the Second Amendment because historically, look at what happened to you. We should be thinking about us. We should not be thinking about the Second Amendment in terms of the post-war South and Nazi Germany because that's why Jews should support the Second Amendment or that's why blacks should support the Second Amendment. Those people be in the majority. I mean, obviously Jews are 2% of the population, but I mean, they will be a part of the non-European, non-white majority, the so-called people of color coalition of the ascendant that is ruling the Democratic Party. Same with blacks. Blacks are 13% of the population, but they are in line with that coalition of non-white, anti-white, this voting bloc in the Democratic Party. So think about that. When we're telling people that you should support the Second Amendment because think about your ancestors, they needed it. No, we should think about it because we're going to be the blacks in the Reconstruction era South. We're going to be the Jews in Nazi Germany. We're going to be the hated minority. What do you think is going to happen in the next 30 to 40 years? They're going to take away the First Amendment, so you can't have hate speech. What does hate speech mean? You can't say anything negative about non-white people. We know that you can say negative things about white people. We know that the anti-white hatred in media goes on all day long, and it's not called out by law enforcement. Not even close to law enforcement. It's not even called out by the media. It's not even called out by anti-racists, so-called anti-racists, and anybody like that. It's not even called out by conservatives. So they're going to go after the First Amendment, and they're going to say hate speech is now illegal. So we can't even talk about things like this. That conversation's gone, right? They're going to expand the franchise. Illegal immigrants are going to get to vote. Prisoners are going to get to vote. They're going to encourage voter fraud. You don't need an ID to vote. This will only facilitate this process. The dispossession will continue. And then what do you think is going to happen when we're in a minority? What do you think these very vindictive, vengeful people are going to do when they get into power in states like California and Virginia? They're going to take your guns. And then what are they going to do when they take your guns? Then they're going to demand reparations. Do you see where this is going? Do you see what this is really about at the end of the day? They're going to demand reparations, affirmative action. We are looking in real time at the creation of an apartheid state in America. We all know that's where it's headed. Nobody would call it that when whites were in the majority. Affirmative action is obviously a policy that benefits non-whites at the expense of whites, right? We look at all kinds of redistributive economic programs that benefit non-whites at the expense of whites. All kinds of civil rights things. I mean, my parents grew up in Chicago. They had a business in Chicago. They could tell you about the abuses that went on, the kinds of wealth transfers and rules and all the different programs. I mean, we know about this. We're in the majority. It's almost like, well, we feel that's our noblesse oblige, and maybe, we feel bad for them. It comes from a place of pity or benevolence or generosity, something like that. In other words, we don't really feel bad about doing it. What does that look like when we're in the minority? What does reparations look like when we're in the minority and we don't have guns? That is an apartheid state. When non-white people have certain privileges and we don't, that is called an apartheid state. And it might sound crazy right now. That might sound like something so far-fetched right now because we do not have any experience in this country living as a minority. And think about that. Who wants to live as a minority? Is that like a fun time? What has the media told us for like 50 years? Being a minority is the hardest thing. No matter what, being a minority is just the worst. People get you down. People discriminate against you. They're just mean to you. They're negative. They don't just swim in the pool. They don't just let drink out of the water fountain and so on. That's where we're headed. Now, do you feel good about heading into minority status? Do you think that the people that are ascendant in this country, Democrats leading this charge of people of color against the white supremacists, you feel really comfortable? You feel really good about that? Do you think that they are going to be benevolent to us as a minority as we are to them right now? Do you think that when we become a minority, when that day happens, that all these policies are going to flip and suddenly whites will become the beneficiaries of affirmative action and whites will become the beneficiaries of, all these government programs, and we will be aggressively inserted in movies and advertisements for representation? Do you think we'll have our own advocacy group? No. When white people advocate for their own interests, it's called white supremacist. It's called white nationalist. We have a variety of, white advocacy groups, American Renaissance, American Identity Movement, VDARE, all these kinds, in some sense are in favor of that. And what are they all called? They're all called white supremacists. They're targeted by the SPLC, the ADL, and so on. This is the big picture. This is the end game. That's where South Africa comes in. That is exactly where South Africa comes in. People wonder what bearing the situation in South Africa has on our current situation. There's a country where whites were in the minority, and it was like it was the moment that it became democratic and they were outvoted and outnumbered by the majority that was non-white. What happened to them? They were forced to flee. Their farms were seized. They were tortured, raped, scalped. It's ongoing. It's a genocide. Is it crazy to say that that could be our future in America? Maybe it's far off in the distance, but where's the arrow pointing? What is the trajectory right now? Because this is what I see happening in every single state in the country. Every single state in the country, this is happening, and you know this. It's happening. What happened in California? The immigrants came to California. The immigrants voted Democrat. Democrats got elected. Democrats passed all this, right? Anti-free speech, anti-Second Amendment, facilitating the rest. Conditions got bad. Quality of life got bad. White people are in the minority, right? What is happening in Texas, Arizona, Georgia, Virginia? Immigrants are coming into these states. They're voting Democrat. They're getting Democrats elected. They're getting complete, unprecedented control of the government. And they're passing policies that continue to facilitate this process and make it worse. That's the long game. That's the long game. That's how it all fits together. You cannot oppose any of the fruits of this without opposing step number 1. You can't oppose step number 4 without opposing step number 1. In other words, boomers think it's so bad, socialism and big government and high taxes and gun control and abortion, and I am with you. I'm with you. I'm not a socialist. I'm also not like a hyper free market guy, but I'm not a socialist. I'm not in favor of public health care. I'm not in favor of gun control. I'm not in favor of abortion. But they will say they're against all those things, but then at the same time say, well, immigrants are fine. They just have to come here legally. They just have to come here legally. They just have to figure out the paperwork. And immigrants coming here is actually a good thing. We need them. We need them for our economy. We need them. Donald Trump said unemployment is so low that big firms need them to fill the jobs. White people won't take the jobs. So we don't like gun control, all the rest, but we do on immigrants. And what is the consequence? What is the consequence? Immigrants come here and it comes full circle. And Democrats vote for more immigration and the cycle goes on. This has been going on for 50 years. This is what the New York Times describes as a tidal wave. It is a tidal wave. What did this guy say? Charles Poland, the 85-year-old retired history professor from one of these counties in Virginia. He said it is a totally different world. His family farm is now dotted with subdivisions filled with 4- and 5-bedroom homes that sell for $750,000. He said, if my parents came back today, they wouldn't recognize the place. The changes came like a tidal wave. This is the tidal wave. This is how a tidal wave starts. This is how it grows. It's like a hurricane. It's metastasizing. It's growing off the coast. And it's crashing onto our shores. It's crashing all the way into the inland in the interior of the country. And it is destroying everything in its path. And ultimately, people say, well, so what? You're against immigration because Republicans can't win elections? No. It's because what do these people do when they get into office? They bring in more of them. And they pass more bad policies. So sure, California is bad because of immigrants. And who led in the immigrants was Democrats. But it's also bad because of all these other things that are going on too. In short, you really can't oppose anything bad in the country without seeing what the root cause of it is. Now, in some sense, maybe off to the side, you've got WASPs and a certain other group that introduced the first wave of immigrants, right? And in a certain sense, something had to get the ball rolling over here. Maybe that's a relevant conversation for another day. That somewhere out here, there was a sort of like moon-like structure. There was some kind of hexagonal structure that projected this initial trend, and sure, it was a lot of WASPs, a lot of other people too. And they really got the ball rolling and they kind of pushed it. But now it is just self-sustaining. It is self-perpetuating. How do you put a stop to it? How do you put a stop to these states turning blue and them taking our guns and taking away our free speech and our country's becoming unrecognizable? Hey, stop bringing them here. Stop bringing them here. Stop bringing them here. We've had enough. We don't have a problem with them. I don't hate immigrants. They just can't be here. I don't hate you. I just don't want you to come live in my house, right? How many people are watching the show right now? I don't hate everyone watching the show. But I also don't want them to come flooding through my front door and eating my food and laying on my couch and breathing my air and shitting on the floor and shooting up on the floor, right? And drinking out of the toilet and they've got tuberculosis, but I also don't want that. That doesn't mean I hate you. I just don't want you to live in my house. I don't hate immigrants, but they just can't be here. I love immigrants. I just love them where they are. I love them before they emigrate from their country. I don't hate anybody. I just love them where they are. You know, when Chinese are in China, oh, knock your socks off. Indians in India, wow, great. That's such a pungent, such a pungent smell. Mexico, oh, I'm Mexican. Oh, I love Mexico. But Mexico is over there. It's not here. And this is what people have to come to grips with. This explains it all. This is the cycle, and this is the part that is really the trick. This is the stream, this is the tidal wave that is eroding the traditional American nation. Everything about it. Its culture, its people, its heroes, its history, its holidays, its songs, its dances, its mythology, its flag. Everything is being destroyed and eroded by this process. And the best part about it is, this will cause externalities that will make it impossible to stop it. Taking away your guns, what do you think that's about? Taking away your free speech, what do you think that's about? They know what they're doing. Externalities are shooting off of this cycle. And part of the erosion is they're taking away the ability for us to put a stop to this or to resist it if it gets too bad. Because that's what their end game is in mind. What's going to happen when we're in the minority and the media still hates us and the history textbooks still say that white people are evil and they enslaved blacks and they killed Native Americans and they bullied Asians, right? And they Holocausted Jews. What is going to happen? Media hates us. Textbooks are teaching anti-white history. We don't have guns. We can't have hate speech. You know, hate speech is outlawed. And now they're demanding reparations. Does it really take a strong imagination to figure out what kind of country that's going to look like? What is happening there? It's extortion. It's extortion. They're coming here, stealing the land, stealing our resources, expropriating it at gunpoint. And that's what it is. We don't want to be a minority, and they don't want to be a minority too. And those things are mutually exclusive, right? They don't want to be a minority. Nobody does. And we don't either. But, you know, I also want to look out for my own self-interest in a certain sense. This is called tribalism. This is unavoidable. Nobody wants to be in the minority. Nobody in a multiracial, democratic country wants to pull the short end of the stick. Nobody wants to believe, or nobody wants to feel like they're on the outside. Nobody wants to feel like they're not getting as much public services as another group. Nobody wants to feel like they're footing the bill for another group. Nobody wants to be a minority. But somebody has to be a minority. And is it going to be white people or non-white people? This is tribalism. We cannot pretend that these urges and impulses, that these realities don't exist. We cannot hand wave them away and say, I'm not cynical, like Charlie Kirk does. I'm not cynical. I'm not listening. I'm not cynical. I'm just not cynical. I'm not cynical. Well, they're pretty fucking cynical. You know, apologies for the language, but what do we see on Netflix all day long? Dear white people. New Year's resolutions for white people. White people can't dance. White people are evil. Fuck white people, okay? So yeah, maybe we're not cynical. That's the problem, because they're pretty fucking cynical, and they're the ones that are going to be running the government, and we're not going to have any guns, and we're not going to have the numbers, and we're not going to have the government. And what do we do then? What do our children do then? What do our grandchildren do then? What are the options then? You know, but that's really racist. Oh, but you know, hey, if you speak out about it, you get called a racist. So I get it. If you don't want to talk about it, I get it. You get called a mean name. So this is when I said it's an important show, great show. This is what ties it all together. You have to put a stop to the demographic change. It's the root of so much of this. And you know, we can sort of get autistic and say, well, what's the root of demographic change? But fundamentally, it's people coming here, and in a democratic system, they have a say, and their say is wrong. I mean, that's what it is. So that's the whiteboard. I hope that kind of spells it out here. You know, gun confiscation is incoming in Virginia. And what do you have to blame for it? And where did it come from? We all know that whatever happens in Virginia, it's so picture perfect. Whatever happened in Virginia proceeded directly from mass immigration. It is a direct consequence of mass immigration. And I don't know, maybe Virginia has to go up like that. Maybe it has to go up like that for people to see what we've been saying all along. What have I been saying? What have we been saying for years? Diversity creates conflict. Multiracialism creates conflict. I don't have a problem. Notice, in this whole show, I didn't bring up race and IQ, I didn't bring up class, I didn't bring up culture, assimilation, nothing like that. But just by its very nature, bringing in people that are different from one another, in some cases diametrically opposite on matters of faith, culture, a lot of things. It breeds conflict. Maybe people need to see that. If Virginia goes up and the government's taking guns, maybe people need to see what led to that. That is our future. If you miss the message, if you miss the warning with California, maybe you'll see it in Virginia. California, I don't know, I guess that was always sort of hippy-dippy out there. Virginia, that's where the Confederate States of America started. And now they're passing gun control. And where did it come from? How did Democrats get control over everything in the state apparatus? It wasn't the people that have lived there for every generation. It was the 38% of population growth accounted for mostly by immigrants in the last 30 years that delivered this. And that same process is happening everywhere. That's our whole country. Am I missing something? And that's why we want Charlie Kirk, and not to bring it back to Groyper Wars, but really, that is why we did that whole thing with Charlie Kirk and everybody else. What are we missing? Please tell us how immigration wins the culture war. How does this win the war for our country, the traditional American nation? How do we put America first and concurrently be in favor of this invasion from all angles? Nobody has an answer for that. Nobody has an answer for that. They will simply say, well, look at what you said a year ago. You made a joke a year ago. You're a bad person. You're discredited. Oh, that's racist. I'm not cynical. These are all evasions, but the reality is there, and the reality is in Virginia. But anyway, you get the picture. You get the picture. It's very important stuff. But we're going to move on. We're going to take a look at our super chats. We'll see what you guys are saying about all of this.